Welcome to Biology for Bastards, teaching biology in the most profane way you've ever seen or heard. I'm your host, John Doty. Thanks for listening. This season, we're going through the AP Biology curriculum, and we have gotten to the fun chapter all about sex. And this week, the coffee has been replaced for beer, with beer, as you probably just picked up on. So this is going to be a lot of fun. So, as always, let's just dive right into the sexes. So, we are talking about meiosis, sexual life cycles, the difference between heredity, genetics, getting all the freaky deaky stuff. It's going to be good. So, people have been aware of heredity for a really long time, thousands and thousands of years, because that's just the transmission of traits from parents to offspring. And people have realized that, kids look like their parents, hopefully, if they're their parents. But genetics is a relatively new thing. That's a scientific study of heredity, and it's only about 150 years old. We had Gregor Mendel, the pea plants, all that shit you might remember from back in the day. If not, more on that later. But that's what genetics is. We are focusing more on heredity today than we are genetics. So, that being said, we got to talk a little bit about how things have sex with each other or how they don't have sex with each other. There's different types of reproduction. There's asexual and sexual. It's all about copying genes to pass them on to your kids. So, with asexual reproduction, the parent passes every single one of its genes onto its kids. It uses mitosis, which we talked about last episode. This is also known as cloning, so they're making clones, where every child is exactly the same as the parent, with the exception of if there's any mutations that happen, all that stuff. Now, this is helpful because you don't need fucking anybody else. You don't need to fuck anybody else. There's another way to say that. You just need the one parent, and that's all you need. It's like, I need some fucking kids. Let's make some babies. Babies. Done. Okay? This is also good because if the parent is good, if it's got some good traits, guess what? Kids are going to have those same good traits. Now, this is bad because if the parents have bad traits or something happens where the parents aren't fit, then the kids are going to be pretty shitty too. Now, with sexual reproduction, it takes two parents. It takes two to make the thing go right, as the song once said. It takes two to make it out of sight. That's funny. So this is how most things reproduce. Not everything. And this is advantageous because by combining the different DNAs from the mother and the father, from parent 1 and parent 2, because sometimes it's hermaphrodites having babies with other hermaphrodites. So I shouldn't say mother and father, it's 2019. From parent 1 and parent 2. The offspring are going to have a unique combination, not only to improve upon, but also for evolution to work with. Now, this is a disadvantage because you do need parents. So, just a sheer numbers game, only half of the people can reproduce. So it doesn't make sense off the top of your head. Why does sex exist? It fucking shouldn't. But because you have these possibilities to make these new combinations, to make these improvements off of the parents, that's why sex sticks around. Now, this brings us into the other part of the math problem. So the first part of the math problem of sex is, why are you only going to have half of your parents be able to reproduce? With asexual reproduction, everybody can reproduce. The other one is, what do you do with all those fucking chromosomes that you have? Because I don't know about you, but I've got 46. As far as I know, I've never been tested. But I should have 46. Most humans should have 46. It's usually a constant among species. Couple examples. The fruit fly, Drosophila melanogaster, has 8. Chimpanzees have 48. Corn has 20. Dogs have 72. Onions have 16. That's all I have written down, so I don't remember any other ones. But it's usually a constant. In sexual reproducing organisms, it's an even number because you get half from half from parent 1, half from parent 2. And if you just kind of went through and did this normal looking thing where we went through mitosis to make the eggs and the sperm, each child would have twice as many chromosomes as the parents, and in a very short amount of time there would be an ungodly number of chromosomes, and that's a problem. So that's where meiosis comes in. So with meiosis, what you do, you chop the number of chromosomes in a cell in half, and you create your sex cells, or your spores, or your gametes, whatever you want to fucking call them. I don't give a shit. But the main point is to reduce the number of chromosomes by half. So you have this sexual life cycle where you have this alternation between meiosis and fertilization. Meiosis, you reduce the number. Fertilization, you double that half number, if that makes sense. So through meiosis, humans go from 46 chromosomes down to 23, and then through fertilization they go from 23 up to 46, and yeah, that's how that works. So all this like 23, 46, we have this many chromosomes, that many chromosomes. I've been tiptoeing around this idea of ploidy, where you can be diploid, you can be haploid, you can be polyploid, all this shit. Ploidy just refers to how many chromosomes you have in a set, so to speak. I like to think of it as how many pairs of shoes do you have. That's your ploidy number. And each pair of shoes is how many different unique chromosomes you have. So as humans, we have a ploidy number of 23. And we usually write it as N equals 23, where N is the number of unique chromosomes. Now, most of our cells are diploid, meaning they have 2 sets of chromosomes. So they have 2 of each chromosome, 2 of each set. So that's like a left shoe and a right shoe. So that's how we get our 46 chromosomes. So those cells are known as somatic cells because they have 2 sets for every chromosome. They are diploid. And those 2 similar sets, the left shoe and the right shoe, those are called homologous chromosomes, sometimes referred to as homologs or homologs. I've heard it both ways. I actually haven't heard it as homologs. I'm just beer instead of coffee, so you know. It's biology for bastards. I can do what I want. It's great. Drink of choice for this week is Goose Island IPA. It's pretty good. 5.9% alcohol by volume. 55 IBUs. Right in the middle. It's perfect. It's a good beer. But the homologous chromosomes, they are, to get back on track, the same size, they have the same genes, and we haven't really gotten to the difference between genes and alleles and everything. But genes are like a category of something, and alleles are variations on that category. So the homologous pairs have the exact same gene. They have the same categories. So it would be like hair color. And those would be on homologous chromosomes. One chromosome might say blonde, one might say brown hair, but they both have the gene for hair color if they're homologous pairs. So we have 46 chromosomes that way. 23 came from parent 1, 23 came from parent 2. So that is a diploid cell because we have the 2 sets. Now haploid, those are our sex cells, or our gametes, the egg, the sperm. They have 1 set of chromosomes because that haploid cell is going to meet up with another haploid cell, and that is going to make a baby. Okay, so every gamete has 23 chromosomes. 22 of them are known as autosomes, and they're numbered 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, and 22. The 23rd pair, those are your sex chromosomes, either X or a Y. If it's a female, it's XX. If it's a male, it's XY. And this gets into the whole, biological sex. It's different from gender. We won't get into that today. Maybe that will be a bonus episode. That could be fun. A gender episode. But biological sex females are XX, males are XY. So every egg has an X chromosome, while 50% of sperm have an X, and the other 50% of sperm have a Y. Fuck you. It's the weekend. I'm having a beer. Whatever. I might misspeak. Now, there is a case where you can be polyploid. So haploid is one set, diploid is two sets, polyploid is more than two sets. In animals, you're fucking dead if you're polyploid, typically. In plants, totally fine. Like, bananas and strawberries are like octoploid or some shit, where they've got 8 copies of each chromosome. But whatever. So, moving on from that, there are some organisms out there that have this alteration of generations, where some are diploid and some are haploid. Humans and shit like that, we are just all diploid. The only haploid cells are sex cells, are gametes. But plants, some algae, some fungi, they have this different process than us mammals do. So in some plants, they have this alternation, where they're alternating, that's the thing, that's the word, of generations. So they have diploid organisms called sporophytes, and then they have haploid organisms called gametophytes. So the sporophyte is diploid, and it will make haploid spores through the process of meiosis, which we'll get into in a bit. The gametophyte is what happens when that spore grows into an organism. It is haploid, and the gametophyte will make haploid gametes by mitosis. And then those will reproduce to get a diploid sporophyte, and the whole thing happens again. Now, in most fungi, the only diploid cells are the single-celled zygote, and what you think of when you think of a fungus is actually a haploid structure. But that's about it. So, let's get into the difference between mitosis and meiosis, shall we? We shall. How to get a drink. So, big difference between mitosis and meiosis, but a lot of similarities. So one of the differences, if you're confused about mitosis and all this shit, go back and listen to the last episode. I think it was the last episode. I don't really remember, to be perfectly honest. Let's say it was the last episode. Go back and listen to the mitosis episode so you can brush up on it. Because there's a lot of similarities. There's a lot of comparisons that we're going to make between mitosis and meiosis, so I just expect you to know it, and if you don't know it, fuck you, go back, relearn it, or learn it the first time. So, with meiosis, we have 2 rounds of cell division. Mitosis, we only had 1, and this results in 4 cells being produced, not just 2. And then we have this process where we have a synapsis and these chiasmata forming in meiosis that do not form in mitosis. So those 2 rounds of cell divisions make some unique things that we don't have during mitosis, and really kind of helps out the whole sex shit happening. Oh, sex shit. That just sounds gross. So we have 3 events that are unique to meiosis, and they're all unique to meiosis 1. So we have meiosis 1 and meiosis 2. Meiosis 2 looks almost exactly the same as mitosis. The only main difference is that you have half as many chromosomes. Oh shit, my ID's up here. That's something totally unrelated to this podcast. I had to take a test today. I almost failed it for this grad class, but I had to show my ID. I just found it. So there's a little fun fact for you. So the first event that's unique to meiosis is crossing over. Okay, more on that later. Then during metaphase 1, we have homologous chromosomes pairing up instead of individual chromosomes. And then the next phase, in anaphase 1, it's the homologous chromosomes that are separating and not the sister chromatids. So, I think it's now time to dive into this shit. What the fuck is meiosis? I'm glad you asked. I'm going to pretend like you asked that question and it wasn't me. So, we have 2 rounds of division because we need to reduce the number of chromosomes in our cells in half. We've already had DNA replication. We talked about that before. So our DNA is copied. We now have 46 duplicated chromosomes. So not only do we need to separate the sister chromatids from each other, we need to separate the homologous chromosomes from each other. So I've already said this, that meiosis 2 is a lot like mitosis. Meiosis 1 is where all the differences happen. So in prophase 1, we have the condensing, if you remember the case, but we also have crossing over, which coincidentally also starts with a C. So we have crossing over happen between our homologous chromosomes, and during this process, the homologous chromosomes are exchanging pieces of information. They are exchanging chunks of DNA from one chromosome to the other, creating brand new allele combinations. So that's pretty cool. That's pretty awesome. Then in metaphase 1, instead of having one line of chromosomes straight down the middle, we actually have 2 rows because the homologous chromosomes pair up, so that in anaphase 1, the homologous chromosomes can separate. And this is the stage where they go from diploid to haploid. This is the reductive division stage. And it doesn't matter what chromosome goes on what side of the metaphase plate. So we have the maternal and the paternal chromosomes. It doesn't give a fuck if the maternal's on the left and the paternal's on the right for chromosome 1 and whatever. They're all just separated randomly. And this is when we get into the genetic stuff. This is what the Law of Independent Assortment is all about. I had to think really hard about that because these Goose Island IPA is not a sponsor unless they want to sponsor us. Might be getting to me a little bit, but that's okay. So in anaphase 1, we have those homologous chromosomes separating. That's where we go from diploid to haploid. Then telophase 1, they're extending, they're expanding. The chromosomes are, that is. They may or may not actually do that. We might have this period of interkinesis, which is a lot like interphase, where they're just kind of hanging out, just waiting to go through the rest of meiosis, going through meiosis 2. And then, like I said, meiosis 2 is exactly the same as mitosis. Prophase, metaphase, anaphase, telophase looks exactly the same as mitosis. The only exception, you have half the number of chromosomes. So, any other things to point out about this? I think that might be about it. We might be able to wrap this shit up. Only thing really to go back and comment on, this might be a short episode, is that during prophase 1, we have crossing over, where they're exchanging that information. The closer 2 genes are on a chromosome, the less likely they are to be crossed over and separated, so you can use those to make gene maps. We'll probably talk about that later. I don't really know. But that's really about it. Meiosis. We barely talked about sex, but this is like the boring part of sex. This is the foreplay. You're really waiting for the action to happen. That comes later. But yeah, that's about it. We just kind of abruptly hit an end. So cold showered that. Thinking of grandma and baseball and other, stereotypes. Grandma playing baseball in a cold shower or something. So, we can wrap this up. This has been Biology for Bastards. I have been your host, John Doty. Our intro and outro music is Feeling Good by Purple Planet Music. Don't forget to rate, subscribe, tell all your friends, all that shit. We're doing awesome. I love seeing those download numbers go up every week. So just keep it going. And yeah. Until next time. Thanks for listening.